Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this next session of BSI's Net Zero Week, where today we will be tackling one of the fundamental questions of this week, which is what is the role of international standards in the net zero transition? And today we will be talking about what this question actually breaks down into across standards development, business, policy and regulation, but also making sure that you know about one of the most exciting deliverables taking place in this space and how you can get involved. My name is Emily Faint. I'm the Senior Policy Manager for Net Zero here at BSI, and I'm delighted to be hosting this webinar with an excellent panel. Before I introduce the panel and take you through today's agenda, just going to run through a few bits of housekeeping. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, please be aware that this is a listen-only webinar. It is being recorded and you absolutely will be able to interact with the speakers, and we invite you to do so by using the Q&A button on the side panel where you can post your questions and comments throughout the session. So please do take full use of that because we are really excited to hear your thoughts and questions, and we will reserve some time for Q&A at the end. Similarly, if you are experiencing any technical difficulties today, please do flag this using the Q&A function, and our great technical team, Lou and Doris on the line, will make sure they come to your assistance as soon as possible. And finally, for those of you who want to access the recording afterwards and watch it back, please be aware that after today's session, you will receive a feedback survey. We kindly ask you to complete it. It will only take a moment of your time. And once you do so, you will receive the link to today's recording. So thank you in advance for taking the time to do that. I'm now delighted to introduce our excellent panel. If I can start first with my colleague Ritvika Sengupta, who is the Net Zero Policy Manager for BSI and also is seconded to the OECD, who will be talking to us today about the role of not just international standards, but quality infrastructure in climate action. We're joined by Barbara Parata-Smith, the Net Zero Lead for the UK Regulators Network, who will be giving us regulatory insights into how standards can support the net zero transition. We are also very lucky to be joined by Jessie Matthew, who is the ISO Net Zero Standard Secretariat. He'll be giving us insights into what it really means to develop an international standard on something as complex and challenging as net zero. And we are also joined by Aaron Sloan, Sustainable Development Manager at John Swire & Sons, who will be telling us about the fantastic work that Swire Pacific has been doing using good practice on net zero in preparation for the international standard on net zero to be released. So thank you all for your time, and really looking forward to getting into this session today with you all. So going into today's agenda, we will be talking about the net zero governance ecosystem, what that really means, and the role of international standards within that. We will be hearing from Aaron on the corporate perspective, what it means in practice to implement good practice net zero standards and the impact that can have. We'll be hearing from Jessie, who will be delivering insights from us on what is the real hard work that goes on behind the scenes that many of us never see on bringing international consensus together on something like net zero action. And we'll also be hearing from Ritvika and Barbara, both at the national and international level, on how international standards and quality infrastructure can support a better policy and regulatory environment that we know from our net zero barometer is being called for across the market. And then, as mentioned, we will open the floor to Q&A from all of you. So with no further ado, let's dive in, first of all, to establish a shared understanding of what do we actually mean by international standards. What you're seeing on screen is a map of the world where every country that has a government-recognised national standards body is reflected. And as I'm sure you can agree, that is quite a significant coverage where standardisation plays a significant role. And BSI, as your national standards body in the UK, founded in 1901, was the world's first ever standards body that recognized the value in finding consensus on shared solutions to shared market challenges, because it cuts costs for business, increases efficiency, and builds market trust that these solutions are working. And in recognition of this value add, in the 1940s, this seeded into the development of the international standard system, what we now know as ISO, who now boasts more than 170 countries in its membership, which you can see on screen. International standards are developed by market-based consensus, meaning that we don't write them, you do. And it is a commitment to making sure that all voices are heard and that the relevant needs and perspectives of each country are conveyed and reflected in the development of international standards. It is this system that is being mobilized to deliver on the net zero transition, to help restore market confidence and trust and allow us to go further and faster. And as alluded to in introductions earlier, standards do not stand alone. As Ritwika and Barbara will be taking us through in more detail later on in today's session, it's important to understand standards do not operate in isolation, but they operate as part of a system of market trust that each of us already rely on every day, from the food we eat to the credit cards we swipe to the trust that the medicine we buy is safe and quality assured. Standards work in tandem with systems of measurement, of accreditation, and of conformity assessment, or assurance as it's commonly known, to help make sure that we all have a shared understanding of what good practice looks like, that it is checked to ensure it's being followed, that those who are doing the checking are competent and impartial to do so, and that this is all underpinned by sound and comparable measurement. This system of quality infrastructure is absolutely key to unlocking a trusted, fair, and equitable net zero transition. So now that we have a grounding in what we mean by international standards and also an overview of the system they sit within, we turn to the question at hand in today's session, which is, what is the role of this system in net zero? And why is there an international standard on net zero being developed in the first place? What you can see on screen is a visual representation of a landmark paper launched at the UK's COP26 UN Climate Change Summit, known as the Conveyor Belt Model for Net Zero Governance. This was developed by thought leader in the space and at the time chair of the UN Race to Zero campaign, Professor Thomas Hale, which noted that despite global GDP being covered almost by over 90% by some kind of net zero pledge, emissions were continuing to increase worldwide. How can two things be true, that there are targets and commitments set everywhere, and yet emissions are not going down? And the paper was a call to action for standardization and the quality infrastructure system to play a stronger role in helping to scale the best practices and innovations of a lot of the voluntary efforts that have governed this space to date, and help scale it and agree it across markets and sectors. In doing so, he argued, this would provide the policy and regulatory stability and rigor that will give businesses confidence in the transition and allow emissions to come down in a fair, equitable, and transparent way. Many of you on the session today may already know some of these fantastic leading voluntary initiatives. You may already be signed up to the UN Race to Zero campaign's 5P pledges. You may already have science-based targets set by the Science Based Targets Initiative. You may already use standards such as the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, or you may already be part of a leading high-integrity business coalition. And your efforts and the efforts of these initiatives have been phenomenal in setting momentum towards building something like an international standard on net zero. But the conveyor belt model argues the pace of implementation that is required to get us back on track for the Paris Agreement cannot be done unless we leverage the formal international standard system. This is where ISO and your national standards body, BSI, comes in. In response to this call to action, BSI recognised that there was more to do for standards bodies like us and the system that we're part of. And following the publication of this paper and the UN Climate Change Summit back in 2021, BSI proposed the development of what is now known as the ISO Net Zero Guidelines, bringing in more than 1,200 stakeholders, including some of these leading standard setters from more than 100 countries in one shared ISO process to develop by consensus an end-to-end framework that defined what net zero meant and brought together all of the key considerations, principles, and recommendations of every stage of net zero action for an organization. It aimed not to reinvent the wheel or come up with new practices, but simply to harmonize and codify this fragmented landscape together to tell a simple, coherent story of what an organization needs to do if they want to get on a high integrity journey to net zero. The guidelines launched by ISO, the UNFCCC, and the UN Race to Zero campaign at COP27, the UN Climate Change Summit hosted the following year in Egypt, saw global positive reception to this action. From UN to UK reports by businesses and policymakers alike, it was very clear that an authoritative deliverable setting out what good net zero meant in a comprehensive, codified way in the international standard system was something that was sorely needed if we were to get back on track and reduce risks of greenwashing. It is for that reason that BSI, in collaboration with our counterpart national standards body in Colombia, Icontech, proposed that the ISO Net Zero standard, the ISO Net Zero guidelines, apologies, be converted into an international standard, which we now know as the ISO Net Zero standard for net zero aligned organizations. And the ISO Net Zero standard, as the ISO Net Zero guidelines set out to do, aims to cover the entire journey of net zero in a verifiable way, converting those recommendations to requirements and restoring market confidence in good practice on decarbonisation. In doing so, it aims to simplify action for businesses, provide a clear market signal based on consensus to policymakers and regulators worldwide on what the market needs to support stronger climate action while seizing the opportunities of the transition. And we're lucky that we're joined here today by Aaron Sloan at Swire Pacific, who can tell us real world insights in what it looks like for an organization to apply this best practice. So I'll pass to you, Aaron.
Thank you very much, Emily. Yes, just a quick introduction to myself and to our company. I'm the manager for sustainable development here in Hong Kong for Swire Pacific Limited. In my role, I lead on climate projects for the group, and Emily, if you turn on to the next slide, you get a bit of a sense of what that group looks like. So there's a few numbers here to give you a sense of our scale and where we operate. So Swire has been around for about 200 years, and Swire Pacific is the Asian arm of that. So we operate across Asia Pacific, predominantly in Greater China. We have three core divisions: beverages, property, and aviation. And then we've also got a collection of businesses under trading and industrial. And then we've moved recently into healthcare. You can get a sense of the size of us there from the number of employees we have. We're in 8 different markets. And if you've ever been flying in and out of Asia, you might have used Cathay Pacific. We have a majority share, or the largest share of them, about 45%. Under Cathay Pacific, then there are multiple businesses there. You can see under aviation with the Cathay Brushwing interlinking them all. And if you've been out in this region and drinking Coca-Cola, there's a high chance you've been drinking one of our Coca-Colas. So if you haven't heard the name, you might have been interfacing with our products or with our businesses anyway. But all this is to say that we're about as diverse as a diversified conglomerate comes. And with that diversity comes great need for standardization. And we've been active on climate change and climate mitigation now for about 18 years or so, maybe even slightly longer than that. But we've been reporting on it for 18 years. And as we've grown and our business has changed, there's been a lot of challenges along the way. Internally, then we've started setting up different things and piecing together what we need to be doing to try and achieve our commitment. And if you change to the next slide then, Emily. you'll see that our commitment then is net zero by 2050. Thank you. And an interim target then for 2030 to reduce our operational emissions from 2018 baseline by 50%. So these are just pretty common targets. I think a lot of businesses will recognize these. The 2030 target is Paris aligned, so we're looking for about a 4.2% year-on-year reduction towards that. We've got our climate policies in place and so on and so forth. And we just issued our roadmap whenever we first started interacting with BSI. And it was a happy coincidence that our Chief Sustainability Officer was in New York Climate Week last year, whenever we first had that interaction, and it's then grown into a trial of the application of the net zero guidelines then to see what we can do with them to try and piece together a more strategic and comprehensive climate strategy when we're thinking about net zero. As I mentioned, we had several things in place. We had our policies that applied across our group. We have targets at operating company levels, so those subsidiaries, but also at the group level. So we've built up from the ground up. And while we have these different things in place, we were constantly barraged by the sort of different initialisms that are coming out, and having conversations internally was getting sort of strained, especially as we're now reporting into the finance director, trying to make everybody aware of what is TCFD, ISSB, IFRS, obviously they're familiar with, but then the TPT, the Transition Plan Task Force, and so forth. There was a lot of different initialisms, and being listed in Hong Kong, we then have to respond with the local disclosure requirements, and transition planning was part of that as well. So in the very near future, we're going to need to start putting out publications talking about our transition, and having something that would reassure the market, give that market trust that you spoke about, Emily, was very important. So if you turn to the next slide. So what we did essentially then was to take stock of what we had in place currently. We took the guidelines as they were in development, those draft guidelines, we looked at them and we went through point by point with the SI to see where we're performing well, what we've got in place, and then where we could find those opportunities for improvement. And some of the more useful aspects of the guidelines were the fact that it has the principles up front, it leads with the principles, and then sets out several different areas where we can make action. And by looking at the principles, there was many of them that we already aligned with. There were some gaps we could identify there, but then going through the actions was getting into the real sort of knotty areas that we've deal with on an annual basis with all of our subsidiaries here. And what we saw was that we have many of the things in place. We were able to pat ourselves in the back for a few of those. However, whenever it came to some of the gaps, there were areas, especially around our supply chain and value chain, that we saw there was areas for improvement. Where we were doing some activities, for example, on renewable energy, we realized that there was areas to improve there. For example, creating a strategy at the group level that could be rolled out for each of our markets and each of the operating companies operating in those markets. And then we also want to better connect our financial data with our emissions reductions. And the holy grail for us in that respect would be to have a well-costed transition plan where we have those marginal abatement cost curves to be able to determine where we're performing well on hard decisions on emissions affect the finances and vice versa. So these are three areas that having gone through the guidelines themselves, we're now looking to strengthen our actions, and work has already begun on those at the operating company and also at the group level. We also then, through our prioritization of the different actions we could take, then find some opportunities for further explorations. So I've listed those there, sort of that fully costed transition plan. Strategic communications and policy positions is another key one. I think being so diverse, and me right now speaking on behalf of the group, there are certain policy positions that each of our operating companies might take, and they need to be we need to make sure that we're communicating well on those and using the weight of the group behind them. So this is one area that we were looking to provide more support to their public affairs department at the group level, but also at the operating company level, to make sure that we can communicate better and identify those barriers to progress, and then try and move the needle when it comes to government policy on those. So I'd say at a high level, that's the kind of what we've what we identified our strengths and what our opportunities were. But in the long run, being able to use the standard to set a common practice across the group, and one that relates not only to Swire Pacific and this region, but also over to John Swire and Sons in London, to operate the other side of the group, which is a similarly sized diverse conglomerate. Having something that translates across both those parts of the group in a language that through ISO is recognized already by business leaders was some of the key aspects where we saw advantages to using these guidelines. And with that, Emily, if you move to the next slide. We've included a bit of more information, obviously, in our sustainability report, which is available via this QR code. And in future sustainability reports, which is also available by that link, you'll be able to catch up on how we've gone further in implementing some of the areas for action that we've identified through this process. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you so much, Aaron, and I think you've done a phenomenal job, both in setting out Swire Pacific's leadership, but also setting out the sheer level of complexity that many organizations are having to deal with as we navigate the transition, but also how so much of this can be simplified and better connected into a coherent story through good standardization. So thank you so much for everything that you and your colleagues are doing, and we hope that as this space becomes clearer and easier with the arrival of a verifiable international standard, many others can follow in your footsteps. So thank you so much, Aaron. Speaking of managing complexity, I'd love to pass on now to Jessie Matthew, who is one of the beating hearts behind this international process going on in that vast system of ISO that you saw on the map at the beginning of this presentation. Jessie, you're seeing firsthand what most people don't get to, which is what it's like to actually bring international consensus together on something like net zero. So with that, we'll pass to you to hear your insights on the process.
Thank you, Emily. Good afternoon to you all. So my name's Jessie Matthew, and I manage the Secretariat of the ISO working group that has been tasked to develop the first verifiable international net zero standard. This working group comprises of experts and technical specialists from various national standards bodies and NGOs that are members of ISO. Nigel Lehane from the UK is the convener for this working group, along with Daniel Trelos from Colombia, the twin convener of the working group. Claire Wigg is the ISO project lead, and I manage the secretariat of the ISO working group. The twinning arrangement of the conveners for this project is an initiative to include the contribution of a developing country through the leadership team and to ensure the needs of developing countries are considered in the development of this key standard on net zero. The main task of the leadership team is to facilitate discussions and to direct thought processes in finding innovative solutions to the various challenges we face in meeting the needs of the diverse stakeholders represented in this group. As the standard is being developed through the ISO work program, I'd like to give you a little information about ISO itself. The International Organization for Standardization, or ISO, is an independent, non-governmental organization that develops and publishes voluntary international standards for products, services, and systems to create consensus-based standards that promote consistency, efficiency, and fair competition across various global industries. Currently, ISO has about 173 countries in its membership, and it brings together all of this expertise from its member countries. Hence, ISO is the ideal platform to develop an international standard on net zero, as it enables the engagement, the contribution, and perspectives of a wide range of stakeholders in the subject area. Harmonization and interoperability is a key factor in the development of this international standard on net zero. ISO has channels of engagement in its development process to include other leading global standard setters in the area of net zero. With their contributions feeding into the drafting and development of the ISO net zero, it is our endeavor to publish a standard that's both interoperable and harmonized with other global standards on net zero to ensure ease of use for organizations to achieve net zero. We have over 300 plus experts, and so far have had about 8 meetings of this working group. The majority of these working groups are virtual. However, some of us had the privilege of meeting face-to-face twice during the course of this project, as you can see from the pictures on the slide. Even in these face-to-face meetings, we did have a large number of experts who joined the meeting virtually. I must say that amongst the experts, there is great enthusiasm and a fostered spirit of camaraderie in spite of the very long hours we spend at these meetings. There's great collaboration and communication and a strong collective identity among the experts and the leadership team in driving the development of the standard. This contributes massively in our endeavor to arrive at a consensus position on very challenging subjects. We've seen experts with views and positions that were poles apart, reaching out to each other, even outside of these meetings, to inquire about each other's concerns, with the view to seeking solutions to the challenges we as a group were facing when discussing critical clauses within the standard. Though the work we do in this working group is very technical, I must say that I've been blown away by the very human aspects on display. The efforts, the emotions, the endeavors of these experts that challenges thought processes with out-of-box solutions to resolve the challenges at hand. At various stages of the project, the leadership team suggested we put together various task groups and ad hoc groups to draft certain sections of the various clauses in the draft, to tap into the large pool of expertise that we had at our disposal from around the world. These task groups then brought back to the full working group of experts the text with various options which incorporated and included the various solutions they came up with in those areas where a single option did not reflect the needs of the wide range of stakeholders and their interests. The passion and commitment we saw from these experts is truly amazing. In managing the working group with over 300 odd experts, it is my role to ensure that all of the experts are equipped, encouraged to contribute to the development of the standard. And when we organize working group meetings, especially the virtual ones, we try and rotate the time of our meetings to ensure we take into consideration the experts from all across the various time zones. Next slide, please. This slide gives you an overview of the timelines for this project. As Emily previously mentioned, the precursor of this new ISO standard is the net zero guidelines that was launched in COP27. In early 2024, a proposal was submitted to ISO to use the net zero guidelines document as the basis to develop the first verifiable international net zero standard. Following the approval of the proposal by the members of ISO, the project moved to the preparatory stage. During this stage, technical experts from all the member countries and organizations had the opportunity to contribute to the development of a series of working drafts. This ISO standards development works on the spirit of contribution and collaboration. At present, we are at the committee stage of the project. The committee draft commenting stage closed about a week ago, and during this stage, the committee draft was made available for about 8 weeks to the countries to consult with their national experts and submit technical comments to improve the draft. The working group experts representing the various member countries and organizations will now meet in the coming weeks to consider the comments received and to update the draft in line with the comments and progress the draft to the next stage, which is the inquiry stage. As per our current schedule, we are anticipating for the standard to be ready for the draft international standard in Q4 of 2025 or Q1 of 2026. The draft international standard will be a global or public consultation of the draft. It will be possible for anyone who wishes to send in their comments through the national standards body that is a constituent member of ISO. The technical comments received during this public consultation stage will be collated and received by the working group for net zero to consider the comments received and improve the draft and to incorporate views and perspectives from the various stakeholders that submitted comments. This process of consultation through the various developmental stages of ISO ensures we're able to produce a standard that is robust and fit for purpose. The inquiry stage is followed by the approval stage, where we are expecting to arrive at by Q2 or Q3 of 2026. At the approval stage, you have yet another opportunity to vote on the approval of the final draft international standard on net zero through a national standards body of the respective countries. If you would like to contribute to the development of the first international verifiable net zero standard, please do get in touch with the national standards bodies of your respective countries to join their National Mirror Committee for Greenhouse Gas and Climate Change Management. This standard will be published as ISO 14060 entitled Net Zero Aligned Organizations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessie. It's a rare opportunity to get sort of the real human insight into this huge endeavour, as well as all of the technical detail. And I hope that those of you watching today feel very assured that when the ISO Net Zero standard is launched, you can be confident that every single word of every single clause has been carefully chewed over by this fantastic group, and of course yourselves, if you do decide to get involved in the process, as we hope that you will after today's session. With that in mind, I'm now delighted to pass over to my colleague Ritwika, who will lead us through sort of the next stage of operationalizing the conveyor belt model, which is looking at the policy and regulatory angle and answering this question, sort of how can international standards like this support a better policy and regulatory environment. So with that, Ritwika, over to you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, delighted to be here with all of you today. As mentioned, I'm the Net Zero Policy Manager at BSI, and we're currently also collaborating with the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, to look at this perspective of what is the role of standards in climate governance and scaling the net zero transition. So you've heard about the huge international effort to develop the ISO net zero standard, and to just bring that back to some of the early concepts from this webinar, that standards do not operate on their own. They're part of this broader system of conformity assessments, of certification, verifiers, accreditation, so those that check the verifiers are robust and impartial, and this entire system is interacting at all times with policy, regulation, businesses and consumers to deliver trust. So that's things like, you know, the credit cards was mentioned. You all have credit cards that are the same size, so you can use them around the world in any card machine. That is this system of standards and assurance and metrology or measurement in action. The key thing to know about this system is that in the same way that there are national standard bodies around the world, which are government recognized, there are also other national bodies that are government recognized that deliver different parts of this system. If we could move on to the next slide. Thank you. And this system is global in nature. So this system of standards and assurance exists all over the world, as you can see in this map from UNIDO, which looks at the maturity of this system of standards and assurance around the world. So how the different national bodies on standards, assurance and regulation are set up may vary around the world, but this system critically is there, and it's there to facilitate harmonization and interoperability and make the lives of citizens easier, you know, that credit card example, and to give us trust in the products and services that we use. And as we look to the net zero transition, it's there to provide trust in our progress to net zero. And critically, in the same way that these different national standard bodies come together at international level to work together, bring experts together, and produce international standards, there are again similar multilateral organizations for other aspects of the system, like measurement, like accreditation. And critically, a very important part of the system are regulators, and they are often on the ground helping deliver that policy compliance, and their role in climate and the net zero transition cannot be overstated. So I'm really delighted to pass on to my colleague, Barbara Parata-Smith from the UK Regulators Network, to tell us a little bit more about regulators and what does the net zero transition mean. I'll pass on to you, Barbara.
Thank you, Ritwika, and thank you so much for inviting me today to discuss these really important issues. So my name is Barbara Parata-Smith. I am seconded to the UK Regulators Network from the Civil Aviation Authority, where I work on environmental policy and strategy. At the UKRN, I lead, develop and deliver the Net Zero programme. So I'm going to start by providing a very brief overview of what the UKRN is to set the context, and explain what I do with the regulatory community and how we connect with standards. So the UKRN is a membership organisation that brings together 18 of the key UK regulators, and you can see their logos on this slide. The UKRN was established in 2014 with the aim of delivering excellence through collaboration. So this is quite a big goal, and we do this by encouraging members to work together on issues of common interest for the benefit, of course, of consumers, the environment, the UK economy. And it is through collaboration that members come together, sharing information, exchanging knowledge and learning from best practice. And in this way, we also champion effective and efficient regulation. We carry out extensive stakeholder engagement program to enable broader perspectives, inform and contribute to policy ideas, provide support and challenge to our members, and offer thought leadership. So we are very much a member-led organisation. We have proper governance, and our work is grounded in our work plan that is agreed by our members. And by bringing our members together, we maximise impact, we engage openly and transparently across our members, and where appropriate externally as well. We work towards consistency, and we want to avoid duplication by learning from each other's work. And of course, we act as the regulatory champion. The narrative on regulation and regulators has been somewhat not the best recently, so we work very hard to correct that and actually provide examples where regulation has brought success and actually has been an enabler in innovation and growth. We operate a strategy through 6 key core objectives that you can see here, and may I point to the second one, supporting the net zero transition, which is really key in today's conversation in this webinar. May I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So there are 4 strands to our net zero transition program. The first is, of course, external stakeholder engagement and events. We carry out extensive, as I said, stakeholder engagement with government, particularly DESNES, the Committee for Change, Treasury, various departments that focus on investment in infrastructure, so NISTA, the Office for Investment, DBT, etc. Of course, we engage with the British Standard Institute, the OECD, various investment associations, as well as a host of NGOs, including Sustainability First. This ensures that we continuously build close working relationships and have access to information that benefit our members. External speakers are a regular feature of our network meetings because they not only encourage knowledge exchanges, but also provide challenge. Second is the Net Zero Regulators Governance Forum. The forum was set up following a recommendation from the Review of Net Zero, also known colloquially as the Skidmore Review, from Chris Skidmore, the MP that led it. And the recommendation asked regulators to improve the consistency of messaging on net zero to regulated industry. The forum has representation from approximately 14 regulators, most of those are our members, with the objective of providing a mechanism through which regulators and government can work together and identify and better coordinate the actions and decisions that are really needed to have that consistency and delivery to net zero in 2050. Third is our Sustainability Academy, which is a bespoke training course that we deliver in partnership with Anglia Ruskin University, and that provides targeted training for regulators and those working with regulators. But it is the Climate Change Network where we focus the most when it comes to that net zero transition, and where the connection with standards and the quality infrastructure sits. The Climate Change Network is one of our thematic networks, and networks at the UKRN offer a dual function. So they bring together representatives from our members that have an interest and expertise in a particular topic. So in this case, it's climate, although it's climate in the broad sense of adaptation and mitigation. So the network is there to encourage knowledge exchange, information sharing, and best practice. And we challenge the thinking of our members with external contributors. But it occasionally takes forward projects. For example, we recently provided inputs into the draft ISO net zero standard. The UKRN, through me, represented several of its member regulators in the review of the draft standard that was available for committee consultation. I am a committee member, and part of my role was and is to raise awareness of this incredibly important standard development at the regular climate change network meetings. So several comments were raised by regulators and submitted. And when the draft was out for committee consultation with lots of support from my colleagues at the BSI, we organised a workshop with regulators to tease out specific comments on the draft. And the majority were noted in the UK submission. So our comments focused mainly on the wider strategic lens rather than the technical side. For example, the need for the standard to align with all mandated reporting by government, the TCFD, for example, that is applicable to both the private sector and the public sector. You know, public bodies have requirement to publish their annual report in Parliament, so aligning with existing requirements is paramount. Furthermore, we also encourage members to consider the ISO net zero guidelines, which have just been mentioned. And as you know, as you've heard, they were quite key to inform the development of the standard. And the Civil Aviation Authority used the guidelines to set standard definition in its sustainability strategy, encouraging that sort of integrity of thinking for better comms internally and also externally. And there are certainly more opportunities for closer working between regulators and QI providers, such as the BSI. And with the new OECD report on reinforcing regulatory frameworks through standards, we now have a really clear set of recommendations and benefits for doing so. So I really look forward to continuing our engagement through our regulatory community, industry, and standard providers in this space. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara. And Barbara's queued up very nicely for me to talk about the report that Barbara just mentioned, but hopefully that gave you a really good idea of the critical role that regulators play in the net zero transition and all the work going on behind the scenes across many of these critical bodies that deliver regulatory services. So as I mentioned, one of the big areas that we've been looking at this year is in collaboration with OECD, looking at this system of standards, measurements, and assurance, and how that can really mobilize and support regulation around the world on scaling climate policy. So I'm delighted to announce that you know, BSI in collaboration with OECD has supported the delivery of this report, which Barbara just mentioned. You know, doing a deep dive into the systems that we've been talking about today on, you know, international standards, that cooperation we have at international level between different national bodies that deliver standards, assurance, measurement, and other regulatory services. You know, the strengths and barriers of the system, the challenges that the system faces. As I mentioned, it's different in every country. And really looking at how this system can enable us to more effectively support policymakers as they look to develop policy for global challenges like the green transition or the digital transition, which of course includes the net zero transition and climate change more broadly. And I would really encourage you to download this report, read it, please give us feedback. There's a lot of great case studies in there on how the system of quality infrastructure has supported policymaking in the past. This system is often quite invisible and under the radar. It's sort of there. It's one of those things when things are going well, you don't hear about it because it's already there supporting consumers, protecting the environment, etc. So please do download it, read it, and if you go on to the next slide, I can talk a little bit more about how this report specifically looks at how the system of quality infrastructure, of which, you know, the international and net zero standard development in ISO is an example of this system in action, how this system can help tackle governance and scale climate action. So as you will all be aware, the 2015 Paris Agreement established the sort of most well-known multilateral process to collectively assess and track the implementation of the different climate strategies of countries. They're often called nationally determined contributions, NDCs. But there remains gaps, and you know, we are seeing a stock take happening right now of the different NDCs, and there remains gaps in terms of what was agreed, what was targeted, and where the policy is right now. And there's lots of data sets showing that there's that implementation gap. So there are three key aspects of this broader standards, assurance, and measurement and regulation system, together called quality infrastructure, or QI, that are absolutely critical, we believe, in helping us to scale climate governance and tackle one of the biggest challenges of today. The first is the aspect of the system where which is all about building consensus. So you heard you know, Emily and Jessie talk about the development of the net zero guidelines and then subsequently the net zero standard. It's all about bringing together diverse stakeholders from around the world and codifying best practice that's already out there in the market. And this is critical because one of the biggest challenges we face in climate governance is fragmentation. There are lots of different policies, frameworks, etc. out there, and it's absolutely critical that we bring all of that information together, codify it, make it interoperable. So, you know, it's wonderful to see this huge effort across experts around the world in doing just that in the case of the net zero standard. Next, this system of quality infrastructure is all about connecting policy and business action, and that really chimes with the need to tackle that policy implementation gap. So we really urgently need to connect countries' climate strategies with corporate action. And that's because these bodies often operate both with policy and with government. So this is a really important system to leverage to connect between the two. And lastly, international cooperation. I won't talk too much about it because a lot of examples have been given already on how this system fosters international cooperation, but crucially, this system can help us scale globally aligned but locally practical climate governance by bringing together countries from around the world and including these diverse needs into single aligned frameworks of standards and assurance and measurement. Next slide, please. And I'll just end there to say another plug to please download the report, do look at it and let us know what you think. We're very happy to have a chat with you. And I'll now pass back to Emily for the Q&A section.
Once it lets me unmute. It's rare that I'm quiet. Thank you so much, Ritwika and Barbara. That was a fantastic deep dive into, again, another part of the ecosystem and the real economy that most of us don't get to see, let alone understand how it's moving. So thank you so much for your insights and expertise. And we are now in the final 10 minutes going to open the floor to Q&A. But before we do so, we know we have taken you on a journey around the conveyor belt model, if you like, from leading voluntary efforts from high integrity businesses to standards development to policy and regulation. And so we just want to do a quick sum up of all of the great points that we've heard today. So do get ready to ask your questions and we'll start to go through them together. So the key takeaways from today are that there is a multilateral international standard system that sits within this broader system of market trust known as quality infrastructure, and it already exists and works for you. And as Ritwika has said, that is exactly why your credit cards are all the same size and work in every country. It's why the food you put in your mouth is safe to eat, and it's why so many parts of our lives fit together. And the fact that the transition to net zero still feels fragmented or confusing or hard to navigate is because this system still needs to play a role in accelerating, harmonizing, and simplifying the transition. And so with that in mind, that is why building on the ISO net zero guidelines, the world's first verifiable international standard on net zero for organizations is being developed with input from so many of the experts on screen, but also from so many of you. As you heard from Jesse, hundreds and hundreds of experts are coming together from across those 170 plus countries to debate every word and make sure this international standard is as fit for purpose as possible. And we are looking to make sure that all of you who want to have a say in its development can do so. So with that involved, we have some calls to action and some invitations to those of you on the line who are feeling energized and motivated to get involved. The first thing we invite you to do is to get in touch with your country's national standards body. If many of you are joining from the UK, then you already know us. BSI is your UK's national standards body. If you go to our website and look for the Standards Maker application form, you can fill out an application to contribute to the ISO net zero standard and apply for your national greenhouse gas and climate change management committee, as Jesse recommended. With the timelines in mind, the next stage is to look out for the public consultation on the draft. So we do encourage you to keep your eyes peeled for that announcement, which will be when the draft becomes public to the world for the very first time. And if you are in the UK, it is us, BSI, that will be making that draft available to you to comment. So do keep your eyes peeled, particularly around the COP30 summit in November. And finally, because we cannot plug it enough, it is a fantastic resource. Please do download the new landmark OECD report on reinforcing regulatory frameworks through standards, measurement and assurance. Whether you're working or focusing exclusively on climate change and managing the net zero transition, or looking at other systemic public governance challenges like public health or AI, this report has fantastic insights and data for you, as well as a checklist for those of you working in the policy space that can help you better use the national quality infrastructures in your country to support your policy outcomes. With all of that in mind, it is finally time to open the floor to those of you who have been waiting patiently, and thank you to those of you who have already submitted your questions. The first one, if I can ask our panel to come on screen. The first one is for Aaron. Aaron, a question we have from Ian, thank you Ian for your question, is what was the impact of having an internal carbon pricing policy?
Good question, Ian. I'd say we introduced, for the broader audience, we introduced our internal carbon price, I think back in 2020, I want to say 3. We, being diversified, we wanted to try and find new ways to try and decarbonize quicker. We got our 2030 target in place, and we're looking at ways we could drive our operating companies to try and decarbonize faster. We have a different mechanism called the Sustainable Development Fund here, and our operating companies can apply to that fund for innovative projects for that industry or in their markets that haven't been trialed before. And while they did have some uptake on that, we wanted to try and force the companies sort of to do it on their own as opposed to coming to the group for financing for that kind of thing. Our internal carbon price then had 2 components to it. One was shadow price, which would be applied to potential future investments. So you would include the cost of carbon in those investment decision making. That was more of an FYI, just whenever it comes to the investment committee, they get to look at it and they can consider the future impact, potentially its impact on our ability to achieve a 2030 target and so forth, or is it going to take us further away from being able to achieve a net zero commitment for 2050? There was, I'd say that probably needs a relook. I think sometimes it's been beneficial in some markets for some projects. It needs tweaked, I think, what we've done there. Maybe more beneficial to us in the sort of shorter term was the carbon fee that we applied. So we took the previous year's emissions and applied value of US dollars to that year's emissions. That then turned into a carbon fee that company had to spend the following year on additional decarbonization projects. I think in the first year we realized that the one-size-fits-all model for internal carbon pricing might not work. We need different ways of applying it to different businesses. But in general, we were able to identify additional carbon budget for each of our operating companies, who then, if projects had been shelved because they couldn't afford it one year, and all of a sudden there was this additional budget that they could use. And while we haven't quantified the impact of the projects that have been implemented off the back of that, that's sort of the next step that we're going to take to do it. But overall, it was a welcome development for our businesses here. And while it's an iterative process, I guess, like using the net zero guidelines as well, we trial it, we see where it works, where it doesn't, and then we go again. But yeah, it's been interesting, good journey.
Brilliant, thank you so much, Aaron. And I think absolutely that framing of net zero is a journey is exactly the right one. This is a journey that all of us are going to be on for a long time, which is why we need a stable and enabling environment to take those steps. Thank you. I'm going to turn next to Alan's question. When is the new ISO net zero standard expected to be released? A question that seems simple, but for Jessie, who is seeing the inside of what building international consensus at pace looks like, I wonder, Jessie, if you're able to take that question from Alan.
We're hoping, as per our current schedule, that we'll have the standard available to be published by the end of Q4, possibly, of 2026.
Great, thank you so much, Jessie. Yes, and I think that everything is determined by the pace of international consensus in ISO. So it is always a challenge to make promises on exact dates. But yes, certainly by the end of 2026, we hope that this standard will be out. And as we are getting to the last couple of minutes of this session, we'll close out with a fantastic question from Stephen, and I'll invite sort of panelists to volunteer on who'd like to comment on this one. So Stephen asks, some actors are portraying climate action as a contentious matter due to skepticism and outright denial of the impacts of climate change. What is the role of a standardized policy in addressing the misinformation surrounding this issue? So a great question and a complex one, Stephen. Thank you for keeping us on our toes. So would any panelists like to come in commenting on what can standards and supporting standardized policies do to address misinformation surrounding climate change and impacts? If no brave volunteers, I'm happy to take this one. So,
I mean, if you want.
Yes, please do. We've gone to the regulators. You probably see the worst of this often from your perspective.
I think first is to say that actually regulators do support standards and the quality infrastructure, and there are lots of examples of how standards are used in regulation to encourage best practice both internally and with our industry. But for this in particular, I'm going to refer really briefly, looking at time, to a piece of work that one of our members did, the Civil Aviation Authority. They published a project that encouraged industry to provide information to consumer booking and searching for flights to raise awareness of the impact on the environment that those flights have. And that information had to be comparable, accurate, vetted, standardized. So the role of standards there was absolutely paramount in making sure that consumers trusted that information that was put in front of them, and therefore in an indirect way, if you like, help them to understand the impact of their decision making in the travel modes that they selected. So when it comes to a landscape that is blighted by misinformation, having robust trust and sort of assurance that what you're looking at is actually what you're looking at is absolutely really significant in ensuring that consumers actually keep that trust, which once you lose is really, really difficult to retain. I will stop there because we run out of time.
Oh, thank you so much, Barbara. And it's great to always deal with these bigger questions with concrete examples, because indeed, misinformation is a problem in this space, and it's why ensuring neutral, evidence-led instruments that support policy and regulation is so key. Which is why, again, the level of interest we're seeing in the ISO Net Zero standard is really a testament to that. We have reached the hour. I'm afraid that we are running out of time. So what we propose those of you who are still submitting questions do, please do continue to use the Q&A function. And what we will do is we will collate them in a Q&A sheet, and our team can come back to you after the webinar. So it only leaves me with the pleasure to say thank you so much to our fantastic panelists, to Aaron, Jessie, Ritwika and Barbara. Your insights have really helped tell such a complex story so easily. So thank you so much for your time, and we hope to hear more from you at a future BSI Net Zero Week session. Thank you everyone for joining.